Good morning, Miss Lavender. How are you?
I am awesome. How are you, Mr. Nelson?
Just a squirrel chasing nuts all over God's green earth.
I can relate.
It's like, oh, there's a nut over there. I better run over and over and over again until I just fall asleep wherever I stop. Right? That's usually how it happens. So, everybody out there in Facebook land, this is the illustrious Lisa Lavender. And she has graciously agreed to participate in our deep dive series here at Pivot on software platforms, job management platforms. Just to put a fine point on it, we feel that having a good and robust software platform is one of the things that is critical to your success as a restorer. We've seen, I'm sure you've seen this too, but we've seen restorers who are still operating on pen and paper.
Yeah, I see it.
maybe it's the what am I, a Zennial, right? Zennial? Is that the one? I'm like between Gen X and millennial.
Okay. Yeah.
Which means that, I want to be left alone, but I also appreciate having a ping pong table in the break room.
Right. Well, it's funny because as I was preparing, I was kind of reliving 24 years in the evolution of my own technological abilities because, I was just cracking up over the clipboards and Nextel phones and all that good stuff.
So I still hear Nextel chirps. Like I will be at dinner and I will hear beep, and I'll be like, and I'll look at my wife. I'll be like, "Did you hear that? Did you hear?" She's like, "You're hearing it again. You're
hearing the Nextel." Well, going off of Nextels, I remember I was literally like, "How are we going to survive? How are we going to operate?" And this is all like in prep for today. I was just kind of reflecting, and I was thinking about when I learned about there's a thing called a cloud, and I started like running around the office. I didn't even know what the cloud, and I'm like, I think we need a cloud. And then I came in the next morning and they drew a picture of a cloud on my door and said Lisa's cloud, So times have changed quite a bit.
Yeah, they definitely have. The other one that always sticks out in my mind is the printed MapQuest directions, right? That lived in a job folder. Those were so clutch.
Stapled to a work order.
Yep, stapled to a work. You got it. All right. So why don't you tell us today? You're here. You wear many hats, and I want to give you the opportunity to talk about all the hats that you wear because I think that's one of the things that makes you special and unique in our world. But we are here today to talk about IRestore.
Yes.
So who is IRestore?
So it's a restoration management software system. Some people call it job management. Some people use the term CRM. And I get a little nutty about that and say it's a run your company system because there's all these different elements. There's the job and there's, relationship management, but there's a lot of stuff in between in the day-to-day operations, which is really my passion is connecting it all. And I guess that's one of my hats is owner and operator of a restoration company for over 24 years. And that's how my journey with IRestore started. I'm also chief operating officer of the Restoration Technical Institute. So I'm also involved in the training side. And it actually all just intersects, which I don't know if I told you this, it might be semi-secret, but I'm ready to just kind of tell the world RTI. And here with Anthony Nelson, breaking news.
That's right, people. That's right. Big deal.
So we're actually combining RTI and IRestore under one umbrella company called Lever 360 because it's so interrelated. I mean, we've integrated the systems. We've gone on the training side. We've added edutech is the other side. So now we say we have business tech, edutech, and we've combined those two things and really a backbone to effective impact of training is having a work design and processes and a place for people to apply it to. And so our, IRestore fits in there. And then for even our implementation and abilities to embrace new technology, you have to be able to effectively train people on it. So it's all intertwined. So we're super excited to be working on that and getting that launched.
Gosh, what a big mess of crap, huh?
It's a lot. I'll spare you the gory details, but we're hoping to make the debut. We're not disappearing or erasing our brands. It's the same people, same everything. Just, we want to enjoy one website, and it's confusing to people we work with because they're just everything's so separated. And so we thought it'll just make everything easier for everybody.
I like it. So what was the birth of IRestore?
So IRestore was actually born with my partner, Ryan, in 2012. And I kind of tell my story that I grew up in insurance. He grew up in restoration. So his dad was an executive in a very large franchise system. And so, restorers were changing Ryan's diapers his whole life, the whole works. And yeah, like his friends, like people who I were, they're like, oh, I changed Ryan's diaper. And I'm like, that's cool. So he grew up in it. He ended up owning and operating a restoration company. And he went to school for computer science. So his passion was, guess what? The programming side of it. So he started IRestore for the friends of the family and the family members that were restorers, and started building it. And then fast forward probably around 2016, I want to say, I realized our restoration company, we had a I call it homemade access database, with a lady who is retired. And I realized we just grew too big. It was not cloud-based. And so it was kind of time to step forward. And we weren't going to be managing software. We needed a real system, although we built it to be pretty robust. And so when I started evaluating all my options and shopping around, nothing was quite right. And nobody wanted to add the things and when I saw IRestore, I was like, that's it. Because the flow was what we already had built. So very similar, like the instinctive flow that made sense, the way we moved. And so me and Ryan started working together on a lot of developments, really in the context for me to use it in my restoration company. And I had my IT company involved, the whole works. And my husband said, as a joke, for crying out loud, as much as you're working with him and enjoying on developing the system, ask him if he'd like a business partner. And I did. And as they say, the rest is history from there.
And I had the pleasure of having dinner with Ted last year. Was it last year? Yeah, it was last year in Vegas. And what an incredible guy. Like, I can imagine being a fly on that wall for that conversation and how that went.
Yeah.
So why do you choose to stay in restoration software? Like, what drives you? What's the passion? Because it's too hard. It can't be the money, right?
Yeah, no, not yet. Maybe someday. I think, and we went through this exercise about a year ago when we decided to combine the two companies, because it's not just about, one website, more, one streamlining things. There's this intense unity around like our drive and purpose. And that is, we love working with restorers and service providers who are, that same makeup. I mean, we're a unique group, and when you love it, you love it. And both teams really rally around making tools and resources for restorers. And so that's really our joy. I mean, nothing, sometimes you can't explain why you get such gratification out of it. But, when you hear you're helping somebody run their business, and, there's so much opportunity and joy to be had, but it can also be very frustrating. And so to be part of, even if it's a little part of helping somebody realize the opportunity and their dreams and with their team, it just feels good. That's what we're motivated by.
Yeah. And like, easy is boring, right?
Yeah, it is. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, make it really hard and nutty and complex, and you get my attention.
Yes. It's a special wiring, but once you're wired that way, like, how do you function any other way,
Yeah.
and it's
My
just a great industry.
Yeah, and the people are absolutely incredible, second to
Mhm.
none.
Yeah.
And I think it's that it takes a special type of person to operate in this business. You have to have a high sense of altruism, a
Mhm.
decent emotional IQ, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's too hard. It just chews you up and spits
Yeah.
you out. And if you have that, you kind of want to be around other people who know and understand your dysfunction, right? And what makes you tick.
I'm glad you said it because I didn't want to be incorrect. But yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I sometimes joke, like our production manager, I'm like, okay, we're allowed one like token normal person, but then everybody else has to be a little bit off, girls, So
One token normal person. Let's pick the guy we're gonna scare day after day after
right.
day.
Right. But the rest, it's kind of part of it, right?
Oh man, that's funny. So what makes IRestore unique amongst all the other platforms? And like the landscape, I want to give a nod to the fact that the landscape of software for restorers has continued to evolve and become infinitely more complex since 2012, right?
Oh my goodness, yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. Well, and I don't do a lot of comparison. I think we go in the direction of we know the use case very well. We're very close to it for one.
Mhm.
And so we go in the direction of the most on our development and what we're going to do next on what we see as being most urgent for user
Mhm.
success. But we also just listen to the people who are using it constantly. I think I don't know if it makes us special or unique, but I think the team and everybody in their different roles is just so committed to each company and each user's success. Like, I think as a team we rally and we'll just stop at nothing. I don't know how else
Mhm.
to really say it.
It's that East Coast grind, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's like more the challenge, the more
Yeah.
we're going to fix this. Like, one of the things and it actually worked out really good because I've been going in circles probably for like 2 years. I was an accountant before I was a restorer. So I am really kind of passionate about revenue recognition. And when people add their construction
Mhm.
services or anything like
Yep.
that, they realize the pain point of cash versus accrual much more because the projects are bigger and you have an earning
Yep.
process. And so, I've been playing with ways and sketching it out and trying to help people on what does it look like so that we don't have to make accountants out of everybody. And, sometimes I get in these conversations where I can tell they're like, please shut up, Lisa, please shut up. And I'm like, I know you don't like accounting. And it was funny because collaboratively as a team, and I'll kind of credit our account exec who's also my son, was able to assimilate it and pull it together into this really cool works for everybody revenue screen, I'll call it revenue
Okay.
section. And so like that's cool stuff it's like it because it's been like this going in circles. How do we improve this without stressing them out on the accounting side? And we figured out a solution. So that's like just very rewarding and fun and in our weird way.
So if Joe Restorer, who, like, let's say, I'll give you the, kind of a targeted example here.
Sure.
So I'm a restorer in a middle-sized market. I'm, averaging 2 million in mitigation revenue currently. I opened my reconstruction side 18 months ago. I just cleared my first, annualized million in reconstruction. And I'm scratching my head. There's no cash in the account, but I'm signing all these jobs. And I have no idea what WIP accounting is. How would you explain that to me? I'll lean into your accounting wit and give you the opportunity to play.
Well, so I explain it different ways, but what I'll say is, so first I allow them to understand what they're seeing because I'll put words to it because I'm like, are you looking at your P&L and kind of going, this isn't right, and you're making adjustments in your head? And they go, yeah. And I'm like, and you have money you earned, but it's not on the books. Yeah. Okay. That's where accrual accounting. And with accrual accounting, we're matching revenues to expenses. And what you're doing in construction process, in construction, you're earning and you're not recognizing the revenues till you have a draw, but that earning process has expenses and you're not realizing the revenues to post against them. So if you produce a January 31st statement and you're like, I know I'm doing better than this, and because you're only booking the revenues when you invoice in February, you just made a mess of your P&L and you can't rely on it. And I shouldn't say you made a mess. I don't want to be so dramatic. So that's how I stress people out. So I don't want to stress people out, but that's really what it is. And so it's kind of like, okay, let's talk about ways we can, first of all, you have to understand it and then you have to make a decision to do it. It's not for everybody. You don't have to use accrual accounting, but as your revenue stream gets more complicated, especially usually it's construction. Like it's not only, like I tell people, you can have a large mitigation project that can have that effect on your P&L or your accounting, but it's usually people feel the pain when they start adding construction and they're like, something's not right. Something's not right. And I'm like, this is what it is. So we think we figured out a way without giving people a headache that want to keep it simple. If you just want to say simple cash, do it that way, but also give some of the tools to do accrual accounting better without stressing anyone out, hopefully.
Awesome. So I always say that software platforms are like shoes. Sometimes you have to try on a few different pairs of shoes before you find the right fit.
Yeah.
What makes a good IRestore customer?
Well, I think we actually, we work with a lot of different ranges from small, larger, multi-location, multi-lines of business. We have a lot of we have functionality where they can have 2 company names and multiple locations. For franchisees, we have some specialized reporting to franchisors to track the revenue. So in that regard, we have a pretty diverse, I think, ones that are most easily able to utilize as many features as possible and get up to speed quickly are probably those mid-range companies, maybe the 20 size, who've already been using some kind of software or technology. I mean, they can get up and running and start enjoying it in 2 weeks. So I think it depends, I wouldn't say there's, an ideal, because there's people who haven't used technology at all, no software, and they're starting. And within that population, you have people who are new to the business, so now they're learning a whole nother set of things. Or you have somebody who's seasoned and just realized, okay, it's time to get to use software and get more efficient and enjoy some of the benefits that it has to offer. So there's everybody comes in different shapes and sizes, and even the business models and how people find success can be very different too. So, the system, I think, adapts to a lot of different models really well, to be honest. Some of our customers, their core business is property management. They're not even doing a lot with insurance companies. So there's even extra bells and whistles that may help serve them even in the estimating side of things, where they don't necessarily need to use Xactimate. We have some really nice, easy to use, easy to deploy estimating tools in there.
And so then if the shoe fits most, who doesn't it fit? Or maybe I'll ask an inverse question, right?
Yeah.
Who has tried and not been able to implement and fully utilize the platform, and why?
I think sometimes really newer companies or smaller companies have more trouble just because it may be almost too much. And I don't, because it's designed that if you're a 2-person company and you have to be, and I kind of try to train people that way. If you're the owner, this is where I got to look at it. If you're running a job, this is how you look at it. If you're the technician, you have to do this. But it can almost be a lot for somebody who's really just trying to capture and run a job well, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. You know,
So I
that
think that's probably the majority of where there's the most struggles. Um,
got it.
yeah.
And this is an off script question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. And you can tell me to go pound sand if you want. What, like, I think, you know, we are defined more by what we choose to say no to
Yeah.
sometimes than what we say yes to.
Mm-hmm.
Where are the areas that you've said no to in the growth and development of IRestore?
You mean as far as functionality?
Yeah, functionality, you know, like you know, what comes to mind is like, oh, equipment tracking, you know, kind of there's all this mess of crap that runs around job management.
Right. Well, it's funny because I think when I started in software, because I didn't know anything about software actually, I had this ideal vision that this is so exciting. I'm going to make iRestore that, I'm part of this and we can build it that you don't need anything else. And I actually had a really cool conversation early on with somebody who was in the space longer that I met. And they kind of explained how that's not a really good, that doesn't work. And I actually learned that really quickly and fast. And so I actually have the complete opposite view now. So, for example, equipment tracking is a great example. And I actually use that as an example quite often with iRestore because it is so robust. So the way I say it is we have equipment management. So you can manage your inventory, maintenance record notes, your manuals. You can know where it is. You can design your warehouse location. You can make barcodes and you can scan it with your devices. And that's where we stop. So if you want it being tracked in real time, there's some great products out there. And then that's kind of how I explain it. And we probably won't do that. There are systems that if you're a large company that deploys, you can use a scanning gun and scan the whole inventory and move it. We're not going to go in that space. So it's never 100% clear, but we've over the years, you get better at saying, okay, especially in today's environment where there's so many, it's like emerging things are so fast that are filling legit needs or could help us as restorers. So you got to say, okay, what are you and where do you stop and start? And it's also where are your priorities? So that's why I kind of say we're an operating system, a hub, but that doesn't mean we have time cards that employees can punch in, punch out, and it'll record their GPS location. But we're not going to try to develop the technology to see where they're physically at. There's so much great stuff that's accessible out there that can do it through the phones, through the trucks, through the, so it's not an exact science, but we have learned and got a better understanding of where we need to say no. And it's also being aware of what's going on out there,
If so, kind of leads me to another question. Integrations, like for our customers here at Pivot, always a hot topic, right? Like, does A talk to B, right? And I'm like, wrong question. Does A talk to B? And then what information goes from A to B and what information goes from B to A, right? Like, because they can talk, but they might not give the information back and forth that you're hoping to see. So through that lens, what are the top integrations that you see your current client base using and leveraging?
Right. Well, QuickBooks, desktop and online, which are technically like two separate integrations, believe it or not. So those are two separate. It's kind of annoying to me, but it is because there's even different terminology, different APIs, all that good stuff. So our customers are able to see different data based on that. We can do most of the core functionality on both, but like costs, for example, we can bring back detail from desktop. For online, it's only the P&L. So those are just for the job. Like you can have your cost, your revenue, and your gross. So, but on desktop, you can see like, okay, I paid a dump ticket. I got it. This is my payroll. So those are popular. The Restoration Technical Institute integration with that digital, because the iRestore training, we've been building micro learning training digitally for even iRestore. So that's housed within, but then they also get access to additional resources through that. So that's a big one. We have Twilio is heavily leveraged by our
cool.
users.
Yeah.
So we use that to power the text communications and all that good stuff. So that's used. We have a lot of Dry Link, Magic Plan. I made like a little list. In Circle, we actually have and you said what is the quality of the integration?
Yeah.
So in Circle, a good example is we just expanded that integration because everybody's evolving. So I kind of like we call them funnels. I don't know if that's a tech term or we just made it up, but so we have like our development funnel. We have our integration funnel for new integrations, but then even our current integrations have a funnel because they're always developing.
Yeah.
And it's not uncommon. We start with like a base, even with an integration, like, okay, let's do this. And then we add to it. Once we see how users are using it. So for the Encircle example, we added the different things. So we push a job in, we're pulling back pictures, we're pulling back notes, documents. I think they just added notes by structure, by room, because that's another. So, it's always developing. Everything's always developing. It's hard to keep up with. So, but yeah, to your point, I think and I don't know our QuickBooks integration is pretty amazing in my opinion, because it almost completely streamlines your everything. And it also creates, as an accountant, what I'm passionate about as well is the internal controls, because you probably, from being in the industry, know people can be harmed financially, the companies, and it just happens, unfortunately. And the internal controls built into your workflows and accounting is really important to protecting, not just the owners, the companies, the other people who work there. And so I'm really excited how over the years that has all developed and flows.
Awesome. Amongst all the IRestore customers, which are the ones you see finding the highest level of success and why?
Like by a category, or how? What do you mean?
So there's, the way I look at this, and this is my framework, right? Like there are companies that use a software and they achieve a base level of functionality with it. And as a result, they achieve a certain level of ROI. Like who do you see achieving the highest level of ROI using IRestore? And what are they doing differently from, Joe Restorer, who's middle of the road on your platform?
Well, I can use my company as an example, although, because we're, it's kind of funny. That's hard for me to say because I feel like people find their own ways to success. And just because they're not leveraging all the functions of IRestore doesn't mean they're not finding success. I see a lot of people who've been on the system. Sometimes it's 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. We have people who've probably been on since the beginning who are like, oh my gosh, there's all this functionality and I want to take advantage of it. So we go through like another round of implementation. That's not uncommon, especially with all the development we've had over the last probably 5 years. So our older customers, weren't even leveraging some of the tools. So, I like to say they could maximize their success and efficiencies by using more of the functions. Like, we talk about this all the time because it's like, I always kind of hold my opinion to myself because I try to respect, and I get it. Everyone has their different passions, that they feel help their team rally around. I am passionate about leveraging tasks and scheduling. And usually I can get people excited about that. But there's some people who like their first thing that they're excited about is organizing their equipment and tracking it using the IRestore system. And so I'm not going to say it doesn't find people success. Berks Firewater, we use it to manage, but I don't make our team scan and move it, to be honest. I don't.
Yeah.
It's not because it's not a useful tool and doesn't bring value. I just, I've chosen not to. So really once somebody's using it to organize the core information of the job and making sure their best practices for recording the relationships, the companies, the contacts, and building their database, the CRM side. You know, that provides a really solid foundation to fold in everything else. But they got to, if they're not committed, I mean, me and Jack say this all the time, it starts with the job. Like, if you're not capturing good starting job information, who it was referred by, who's the carrier, if there's a carrier involved, all that, you know, you're only going to get so much out of the system. It's just that simple.
Yeah, I completely agree. What question do you have for me? I started doing this when I was doing my Facebook lives because I'm like, it feels insincere, right? Like I'm like, here's another question for you. And like, I think it needs to be fair. Like you have to have the opportunity to fire a couple my way.
I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, at IRestore, and we're getting ready to launch On Chain. So we're super excited. But one of the things with On Chain is we're reviewing things. I kind of say to our users, we have a bajillion reports. And if we don't have a report, we'd probably make it for you if you need it. But so what I'm doing right now, I'm going through an exercise to survey some of our super users that we're really close to on the indicators they want to see, like the things that are flashing red, like alert, the reports, and the live boards. And so I mean, this is part of your expertise is the KPIs and stuff. So I'm curious, what do you think the most important things like owners, managers should be looking at, like weekly, daily, like what should they be seeing?
That's open-ended.
Well, you did it to me. I'm just returning the favor.
Yeah. No, that's fair. It's fair. I'm just saying, like, it's going to be a long answer. You better be ready. Put your seatbelt on.
I'm going to take notes. So
one of the things that we track, and I got to give a nod to John Kowalski on this one because I never looked at the business in this way. So we actually track return on investment as a KPI for business owners, right? Like you've put a certain amount of capital into this business. What has the return on your investment be? And obviously the goal is to do better than, you know, your 8 to 12% that you would get if you just dumped into a standard S&P 500 index fund in the stock market, right? You should beat that. Otherwise, if you're not beating it, pull your money out and put it into that, right? You're going to win the game of capitalism better that way. I like return on investment for the owner perspective. One of the things that I think doesn't get enough attention is cycle times, like how fast we produce things. You know, kind of double clicking on that estimate, you know, I always term it as estimate lag. You know, everybody's kind of got their own name for it, but what is the length in time from when we visit a job site until we deliver an estimate? And there was a statistic, and I'm paraphrasing and bastardizing it, but it basically, the statistic was for every single day past 2 days that it takes you to get an estimate to a stakeholder, your chance of having a rebuttal to something in that estimate grows by 30%. Wow. So meaning that at day 6, there's 100% chance somebody's going to ask a question and slow this thing down. But the faster you can get at producing estimates, the better off you are. And I'll do one more because it's on the top of my mind. So one of the things that we track for all of our member companies is like cost per lead and cost per sale as separate metrics, right? Because you can drive a bunch of leads, but if they don't convert to the cost, you know, to the sales side, then you're sad. And the inverse can be true as well. You can be spending a lot of money getting a lot of work through that sales process, but really it's looking at your lead sources and then trying to optimize for the highest level of ROI on your marketing efforts. And so we tend to look at, like, you know, your traditional, you know, B2B marketing with your route sales, that kind of stuff. If you're, you're whale hunting, whatever, right? Like whatever that is, fully loaded, plus all of your internet ad spend, whatever dollars you're spending to go acquire work, how do you increase the efficiency of those dollars in that spend?
Yep, love that. And yeah, I'm glad you said that in a metric. We actually caught by company and contact on the CRM side will track revenues and expenses related to it. But I think we could probably come up with some reporting. Am I allowed a follow-up question?
Sure.
Because I followed you and everything, and cycle times I totally agree, and big on even companies having best practices that revolve around that. And, I didn't know that statistics. I think it's easy. I think that's very interesting. But I also add, the more we touch a job and the longer it's on there is the more our overhead is. I'm like, clear out that job board, because how many people are touching it just because it's alive on there, right? So on the ROI, where do you see restoration software being part of the solution of tracking that?
Wonderful question.
A big term.
This came up in my conversation with Zach from Aldiware last week too, but there's a way, like, you have to quantify your decisions, right? Like if I came to you and I sat down and I had this wonderful, like you did a demo for me, and like, because you're so charismatic and inspirational, like I'm like, oh, IRestore, I'm fired up and it's going to fix all these problems, right?
Right.
I look at it and I go, okay, it's like, your typical accounting ledger. On one side, you have the expense of the software, and you need to include like, hey, what's my labor? Like I got to onboard X number of technicians at an hour and a half a piece, or like whatever that is, right? You got to capture all your costs on that side. And then you also have to be able to tally the efficiencies that you gain, right? Like as a result of implementing this software, we're going to save this much time per job, or the quality of data that we capture. Maybe we don't capture it at the technician level, and this is common, right? But it speeds up everything on the admin side. We're going to have some savings on the admin side. And then on that benefits column, the one thing that I'm always keen to think about is there tends to be this frustration index relative to software implementation as it applies to the field. And if you can make it easier for technicians in the field, it doesn't matter if it takes them less time. It can take them the same amount of time, but if you make it easier, you see a productivity boost in other areas, because happy technicians work harder and faster. And that's like, we all know that, but how do you measure it? And so I like these ROI models around software tend to be very loose and shoot from the hip. But I always tell folks, do your homework, right? Like have your assumptions documented, so then that way when you implement, you at least have a rubric to say, oh crap, I was like dead on there, or I was way off.
No, you're right. And I actually apply that model even when we buy a new piece of equipment, because I'm kind of like, okay, don't forget, you have to store it. You have to train everybody on it. You have to update all your SOPs. Like there's, it's not as cut and dry as people think. But no, I think that's good. And, I just want to mention one thing that I think software should help us do on the ROI when people are thinking through that is it's a productivity and a streamlining. But I think, like, I'm big on reducing errors, and finding things, especially in construction. The more we get transparency of deviations from scope and stuff like that, I think there's a lot of money to be saved when you have a system that helps you do that.
Or be captured. How many times are guys out there, hanging Mrs. Jones' ceiling fan and not charging her for it, right? Because they want to be nice.
Exactly. That kills me. Kills me.
Totally agree. Do you have any closing thoughts as we wrap down?
No, I just appreciate the opportunity. And it's always good catching up with you. And, if anybody wants to learn more, they can contact us and me and whatever else. And I'd be happy to show them around IRestore.
Right on. And I'm looking forward to our deep dive later on in the week. And so if you're a Pivot member, those are always at 1:00 Eastern on Thursdays. And, we've getting a lot of traction with our deep dive series around software platforms.
That's awesome.
And for that, I'm super thankful to you, the entire team over at IRestore, and even for our membership. I know they find tremendous value in you giving your time. So thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. I appreciate it.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. Hang on one. Oh, just lost her.